Hello, everyone. Nothing to talk about today. Just hanging out. No news is good news. Just a couple of Rangers guys enjoying the weather, and a Toronto guy and a Philly guy. So anyway, yeah, let's get right into it, shall we? Let's start right up because we have too much to talk about. Oh my! So sorry. Playing with their lower thirds, we have like listen to this doesn't mean anything at all, but if you don't listen to it and you watch it, you see that we have these things that say our names on.
It's like Google gave us a crumb today. They threw a crumb back to us. Yes. They gave us the lower third, and they took away Mike's sound effects. This is a good day.
No, don't worry. I'm going to respond with the sound effects, but this is to reflect our political differences here. One of the I am not responsible for firing James Comey. I swear to God.
Whenever someone comes on the show with a lower third, they have to make it in their political color. Fantastic.
Can I put yellow? I'm going to put a different color.
You can do anything you want.
I'm kidding. I know.
Mine doesn't work. Mine's broken. Anyway.
Let's start the show.
Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, May 10th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. Help you with all of your hockey needs and discuss the 6 teams still remaining in the playoffs. Let's start right there because I know everybody has a few opinions on this. I wrote about it today too. So I was the Senators-Rangers game last night. Let's start with you, Russ. Immediate thoughts?
All right, so my immediate thoughts were they never learned how to beat the 1-3-1. They had guys that on paper should be able to do it. Like a Rick Nash on paper should be able to shred the 1-3-1 by taking the puck up the ice and going straight for the net with the puck, or someone passing a stretch pass to him and him going straight to the net with the puck. And he did it like twice in that game, and I think he missed the net once, and he had one good scoring attempt. So Rick Nash wasn't getting it done. Zibanejad did, and Kreider did, and why they didn't do it more it makes no sense. Why was Brendan Smith so important again late in the game when if you want to possess the puck, don't give it to Brendan Smith? I think if Ranger fans learned anything last night, they learned that. Because at the end of the game when you have the goalie pulled and you just vapidly just throw the puck in the corner, when you know that the Senators have won every single puck race that game, you gave up the puck for another 20 seconds at a point where you really needed to set up a power play. And I know that's an oxymoron, but that's where we're going. And the other real puzzling thing besides Stepan still being on the power play and things like that is there was a time on the power play where they had 3 men high. It makes no sense to have 3 men high, but they did it. And for the 4-minute power play, Kevin Hayes took the most shots. It was almost like nobody else wanted to shoot the puck, and that was a little scary. So, they didn't have it. They just didn't.
How about you, Jan? What are your thoughts?
So, a couple of them. So, while I usually agree with Russ and I agree with him on a bunch of things, I disagree with him on the 1-3-1. I really don't think the 1-3-1 was a major impediment during the whole series. The Rangers had material chances throughout. I mean, last night, notwithstanding, until somebody finally gave him their coffee with a jolt of Red Bull in the locker room in between the second and third period, because just like the Tampa game in Game 7 in 2015, they came out flat in an elimination game at home, which should never happen. The 4-minute power play, I agree with you. The setup was horrible. One thing I was looking to see was sort of like the Washington goal the other night, where you go from half boards down low to slot, where the goal was scored by Oshie. They never tried that once yesterday. They kept relying on trying to get traffic in front and looking for rebounds and trying to score that way as opposed to putting pressure on them. Interesting enough with Smith, I thought that the bigger and more egregious points related to Smith was on Mark Stone's goal, he kept backing up and backing up and backing up and ceding way too much ground and not getting up on him, which gave him an angle to shoot on. B, if you look at also the goal that was scored by Carlson first, Zuccarello just missed a breakaway. He put the puck off his skates just slightly too far for him. And then Smith had Ryan lined up on the boards to just blast him and separate him from the puck, and he let him go. And then Kreider, for some reason, let Carlson go in the slot, and Shea was a step slow in terms of getting there. And that created the goal. And they found a weakness with Lundqvist in terms of top shelf short side, which is where Stone beat him and where Carlson beat him. But I think the bigger point was one, as I said, they were very flat early. They didn't wake up really into the third period, spurred probably by Kreider's goal, and that got them going. And then if you notice late, what they didn't do is, which is what Ottawa did, they didn't have a ton of traffic in front. They didn't get enough bodies in front of the net and just tried to muck and grind and put the puck in that way as opposed to getting a screen. You had one shot where Miller tried to knock it down and put in the net, and that was probably their best shot, even though it didn't get close. But they failed to do what Ottawa did late, which was throw bodies in front and just keep banging and pushing and scrapping. And what I also thought was interesting is he didn't shorten up his lines in the third period until it was a bit too late. Why Tanner Glass was getting minutes midway through the third period made absolutely no sense to me. And this is what I think some of what you wrote, Eck, is, and something we've been talking a lot about, is the inability or failure or stubbornness to make adjustments. Yeah. You got to play your best guys. And as I wrote, and I used the war song where it says, blind faith in your leaders will get you killed. Blind faith in your veterans will get you knocked out of the playoffs. And that's kind of what happened here. He relied on guys that probably should have been benched, as opposed to paying guys like Lindbergh and Fost and Grabner were their best forwards, and he didn't play Lindbergh and Fast nearly enough, and he kept rolling the guys that were not doing anything out there until it got too late, especially as you went down the stretch in the third period.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Mike, go ahead.
I know that Senators fans will be upset with my analysis here, but I think that the better team lost this series, and I think that the reason that the better team lost this series is because of the coach of that better team, Alain Vigneault. I mean, and I said this before the Game 6 loss. I mean, when you have Chris Neil neutralizing, your team, the other team's energy in Game 5, and I said this to Russ before the show. The move was for Alain Vigneault to go more skilled, to maybe put Butch Nevish back in the lineup, and instead he goes with Tanner Glass. Tanner Glass didn't have any kind of effect in the game, and Chris Neil played, and I think he played a minute and a half. He really wasn't a factor, but that team for the first half of the game, I think, lacked energy, lacked imagination, and I think that, calling out Ryan McDonough, who's one of the best players, one of the best defensemen in the league, to ask for more effort is just a call of desperation on the part of Vigneault.
Like getting that last bit of juice out of the orange. That's what he's trying to do.
I mean, come on. I mean, it's not Ryan McDonough who's the problem. And if you're using Ryan McDonough as the example to get more out of Kreider and Stepan and other players, then you've failed as a coach, because I would say it was a block of 5 or 6 players that did barely show up in the playoffs for that team. They won the first round, basically with Lundqvist and a couple players, and in this round, some of those couple players didn't show up as much. So I mean, I think, and I mean, more than likely they're not going to fire Vigneault. Russ told me they just signed him to an extension, but this is a situation where maybe next year, middle of the year, if they're slumping, if they're not performing up to snuff, Alain Vigneault's head is on the chopping block.
So it's interesting. I mean, one of the things I'll end up writing about is, Vigneault signed a 2-year extension. I do think the coaching staff has to have some changes. First of all, Scott Arniel has to be gone. Both the power play and the penalty kill this year struggled. That falls on the coach. Granted, it falls on the players, but it's got to fall on the system. I don't think Jeff Bukaboom is going to be gone. He just came in as a defensive coach. I don't know if he'll be gone. I'm not quite, surprising enough, I don't think he added a ton, but as Ross can attest also, Hartford doesn't have particularly great coaching, and there's nobody in the system to really add to bring them on board. Jernander has been a guy who's been there for years, and that team has really regressed substantially. But the team in general, as you said, the better team, in my opinion, lost. And Ottawa fans and Ottawa probably players don't particularly want to hear that, but it's true. I mean, games 2 and game 5 were the killer. You made a mistake in game 2. You repeated that game 2 against Montreal. You repeated the same mistake again in game 2 against Ottawa, blowing a 2-goal lead late. And then you repeated the same mistake in game 5, where I'm not quite sure why Tanner Glass was on the ice the last minute and 40 of that game to begin with. You have guys like Lindbergh and Fost who are much better defensively that you should have been relying on down the stretch. And then the biggest and the most egregious thing, which is something we've all talked about, is why Brady Shea wasn't trusted in. I'm tired of hearing that he does trust young players to a point, but for some reason neither he nor Bukaboom could get in their heads that Shea should be on the ice down the stretch. He didn't play the last 5 minutes of game 5 and the last 6:38 of game 2. That is a material major mistake that was made by 8V and the coaching staff in both of those games, and that's the main reason why they're home right now and Ottawa's advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals.
I do want to give some Ottawa pluses, though. I do.
Yeah, no, that one is good. Go ahead, Mike.
I talked about Stone and Hoffman the last couple of games. They've been coming on. They did have really good games, and they did, and they were really hard to handle. I did talk about Turris being impossible for the Rangers to cover the whole time, and he was still impossible for them to cover in that game. Even though he wasn't huge on the point board, he was huge on getting into the offensive zone and just making that first penetration and getting the puck to his teammates. The Rangers had no answer for that. I have no idea why. The most awkward part of that game, though, was after the game. Clearly, Erik Karlsson played an amazing game. Again, just staving off the pain that he's having to stave off every game. We'll never know that pain. Hopefully, we won't ever know it because you don't want to. But he's doing an interview with Pierre Maguire, and the interview's going long. Like after 2 or 3 questions, you could see that literally Karlsson is having trouble standing up, and he's wincing in pain, and Pierre keeps piling on questions. And there has to be some point where you have to let the poor guy off the hook and let him go to the locker room because he was dying out there. I just felt bad. I don't know if you guys noticed that or not.
No, I did too. It's a tough spot, you know.
It is.
It's a tough spot for Pierre to be in. It's a tough spot for everybody.
It is.
You know, I mean, you've interviewed people after losses. It's just after the playoff loss, especially.
But he was in physical pain.
Yeah, physical pain. I agree. I mean, you got to try to find somebody else. Like, what I've noticed about Pierre, and well, that's true about everybody, but you know, you really see it about Pierre because we see him so often. Is that they have their go-to people, you know, like the people that they trust.
Yeah.
Give them good stuff at the right times, you know. And I think that's one of his guys, you know. And he was going to go there, and he, you know, and especially you're going to go to the person you absolutely trust the most after in a situation like this, you know, somebody who's going to not screw you. Because you know what's going on, you know that this is a hard time to talk, and I think that's why he went to.
Well, I mean, Karlsson is the guy to talk to. I mean, if there's an MVP of this series, it was him. He was the key. He was the key player. He was the number one guy. You have to talk to him, but at a certain point, if you see the guy in discomfort and you know he's playing injured, you know. Yeah. Don't have a 3-minute interview. But let me just say this about the Rangers going forward and what I don't think that that core group, everybody was ready to maybe point out, the ineffectiveness of guys like Girardi and Mark Stahl. I don't think that was the problem in this series. I think it was more a guy like Brendan Smith, who was trusted with a bigger role than I ever thought he would get as a late season add-on, and how I think how badly he played in that situation. And I'll tell you right now, he's a UFA. There has been talk about the Rangers re-signing him. If I'm Jeff Gordon, I stay as far away from him as possible. And here's a note to Lou Lamoriello: do the same as well, because this guy is not worth the money that he's going to get in free agency. I'll tell you that right now.
I kind of disagree with you on Smith. I actually thought Smith played pretty well this playoffs. He didn't have a great Game 6. He picked the worst game to have his worst game in the playoffs. But the guy actually, he and Shea had probably been two of the Rangers' better defensemen. And using Russ's line, that's probably an oxymoron right now in terms of best in defenseman putting together with the Rangers' name. But I really thought he actually had a good series. And granted, it's going to come down to A, how much he wants to get, and B, I mean, if you read my blog today, I think that they've targeted 11 or 12 guys on the Rangers to get rid of. So it kind of depends on who you listen to as to who's going to be back next year. A lot of speculation in terms of a massive overload or just tweaking, and most people kind of felt this was a growth year and then next year would probably be a better year. But there's a lot of question marks on this team once again. And the blue line being the bigger question, just like it was last year, and that's going to drive what direction they go in, be it Brandon Smith, be it Kevin Shattenkirk, what happens with Girardi, what happens with Stahl. All of these things are going to have to answer in the offseason, and the expansion draft adds another layer, an element on top of it.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't Shattenkirk, Jan. I mean, maybe somebody like New Jersey who has a ton of cap room can offer him $7.5 million, but every indication out there is that he wants to play for the Rangers. And if that's the case, then Brendan Smith is not even going to get signed.
I disagree. I don't know if Smith, again, they've signed a couple of guys, Alexei Bergazov, who's Russ talked about a couple times, Neil Pionk they've signed. Yep. They've got Ryan Graves in the system. So there are other players. It all depends on what happens with the no movement clauses, both with Girardi and Stahl. Do they get them to waive them so they can try to end up trading them in terms of no trade clauses? And that's
the real key. Those three contracts,
And I'm not quite sure what Sather was thinking in terms of doling these out, because honestly, with the amount of money he gave them, I don't think you necessarily needed to include these to try to get these guys to stay.
He wasn't. Right. That was the problem. He wasn't.
Right. And these 3 contracts hurt him. Here's what I would do just in the short term, because it'd be nice if you could trade Derek Stepan. It would be. It's not feasible that it's going to happen, but I certainly would go to Montreal and try and work something out for Galchenyuk. I would do that tomorrow. And I would talk to Stepan and just say, hey, we're trying to get younger. Help us out here. You never know. You don't know until you ask the guy. He might be willing. That's one thing. The other thing is I definitely would go into the draft and try and move up in the draft. They need a center. There are no centermen in their system. Nothing. It's barren. They need a centerman. And if they wait until the 20s in this draft, it might be waiting too long. If they can get in within the top 10 or 15, it would be a big help. And you'll see that 1 or 2 of the guys that they probably have on their board of like 6 or 7 really good centers, somebody's going to slip down close enough to them that they probably could trade a decent asset for it. But they have to do that because, again, going into next year, if all things are the same, Zibanejad or Stepan are your 1C, which neither of them are a 1C. Zibanejad played real well, but he did prove he's not a 1C. So you don't have one. And the only way you're getting one is through the draft. And here's the other long-term plan, and this is something Mike will hate, and Mike and I will be at odds with this, but you do have to have a plan in place in case John Tavares doesn't sign with the Islanders, because if he doesn't have contract talks with the Islanders this summer, if I'm the Rangers, I start looking in his direction.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Well, no, and I agree, Russ. I mean, you have to plan if that happens, but if there have been rumors out there about an 8-year, $80 million contract. If he signs that on July 1, then
it's over.
Then it's over with. But if it's July 2nd and he hasn't, then immediately, 2 years ago when Stamkos didn't sign that contract right after the beginning of July, it was on. And I understand that teams have to be prepared for that eventuality. And as you said, they need a number 1 center. I mean, from the Toronto perspective, they've got Austin Matthews. Toronto is out of the John Tavares sweepstakes.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't need him anymore. So I don't think, and he's a fantastic player. But when you have Austin Matthews, if he continues on the track that he's going to potentially follow, and you've got Nazem Kadri making $4.5 million for another 5 years, why would you spend $10 million on John Tavares? It makes no sense.
Right.
I mean, and the point I'll make on the 1C, I mean, if you look at all the teams in the league, the majority of them that have the stud 1 centers are the ones who got those players very early in the draft. Right. I'm not quite sure if you'd say that every team in the league has a number 1 center.
Not everyone does, but they need one.
But the point is, I think Lindbergh, what is going to end up happening if they do get rid of Stepan and do get Galchenyuk, which to me I do backflips because I haven't, as much as I like Stepan, I really think Galchenyuk has barely scratched the surface of what he can become, although there's a lot of question marks with him if he'll ever get there, say Brendan Gallagher in Montreal. But are you comfortable if you don't move him to center going with Zibanejad, Hayes, and Lindbergh as your 1 through 3 down the middle?
I can live with it.
All right, real quick, I've been doing some research while I've been listening to you talk to, because there's something that stood out to me, and I wanted to see if this actually played out. When I was looking at the Rangers before the regular season, okay, just before this whole thing started, and a lot of people were looking at the Rangers, and this is from a person who doesn't watch the Rangers all the time. I was thinking, okay, this is a team that's actually pretty young, like and they don't have a lot of scoring, but they have a wide range of players who can score, and they don't have a big,
allegedly.
Yeah, they have a big guy, but whenever you're going to get scoring by committee, you're very susceptible to what happened, right? That's the reality of it. Like, the teams, we always say, scoring by committee means you don't have a scorer,
Right.
Like, and Mike Milbury pointed that out. It was the one thing he pointed out yesterday that was correct.
Okay, yeah, and
even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Right, I look at the regular season, and I see the goal scoring that they had, and Kreider, the top goal scorers were Kreider, Grabner, Nash, Miller, and Stepan and Hayes, and VC. We'll throw VC in there. But the most that is 28 goals, right? Kreider is 28 goals, and that's the most points they had was under 60, right? And Zuccarello.
Yeah, Zuccarello at 59.
Yeah, so you go to the playoffs. Zuccarello, Grabner, a lot of these guys aren't in the top. I mean, Nash had what?
5 points.
5 points. 3 goals and 2 assists.
3 goals. Miller, none, right?
Hayes didn't have a goal.
Right. Hayes didn't have a goal. So your top scorers here didn't show up now. But when I say that, a lot of these guys are still very much in their prime or getting into their prime. You know, these players are not. We're not because the knock on the Rangers has been they've traded away a lot of players and given up a lot. They've given up a lot of their future, right? Like they don't have the young players coming in.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they really are a rebuilding team. And is it possible? I mean, when I look at them, they really are in the middle of a rebuild. It's not necessarily a terrible rebuild. I mean, there are certain players like Nash, of course.
Well, this is if you believe Kevin Hayes is a building block. Like Kevin Hayes,
I do. I mean, I think he is. I mean, he had a bad year.
Here's the thing. If we do a cost analysis, and I think Jan will appreciate this, of the Rangers power play for the amount of time that certain guys got for the amount of production they did, Stepan, Hayes, you would toss them out on their ear. Grabner gets no power play time. If he actually had gotten some, he could have added valuable points. And there's other players on the team too that are good power play people, but yet the minutes get sucked up by these guys.
And this managed is another story, you know.
But Hayes has not proven that he is an everyday NHLer for the next 10 years. To me, he has not proven that.
I mean, they're
49 points, you know, in 76 games or whatever. You know, that's a regular NHLer.
Hayes had a good year too. Let's be reminded of that.
It depends how you look at it, right? Like, is he a third line regular NHLer? Yeah, but is he going to be a top 6 NHLer? Is that what he's supposed to be?
The Rangers are they are bringing in young players like Shea and like VC who could be cornerstones going forward.
And Buchnevich, who really didn't.
And Buchnevich is right, but they have to do a sort of a cost benefit analysis this summer. You have Rick Nash at $7.8 million in the final year of his deal. You've got Girardi, you've got Stahl making over $5 million as defensemen, and on probably at the tail end of their prime or in their decline. That's a little less than $20 million right there on 3 players who probably have seen their better days. So at that point, Jeff Gordon really has to make a decision of trying to get these guys off the roster and trying to spend his money more economically on players that are in their prime and that can lead them to the promised land. That will be the challenge for the Rangers this summer.
Well, every team has that, though. That's not a unique challenge to the Rangers, in my opinion. Like, that's a team. Every team has a couple aging players that are making too much money. There's no question about it, right? That's
yeah, but the players that are in their prime, as you mentioned, Ek, I mean, they're marketable because they're in their prime, but maybe they've proved over the last 2 or 3 years that they cannot get this team as far as they need to. Stepan is limited. Kreider is limited. I mean, they're good players, but when it comes down to it, they're not getting them where they need to go.
And I do have an answer to Jan about the 3C problem. I still would rather see Lindbergh be the 4C. I would, because he's a really great face-off guy. And I would try and get Ryan Spooner. I would. Boston's doing everything they can to get rid of him, and I would try and get him.
Actually, I've heard recently that Boston is trying to keep him, but I think that's
We'll see.
There was definitely a time when they were trying to get rid of him.
But Kevin Klein for Ryan Spooner, done deal. We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You wish.
I mean, the defense is obviously the issue, but when you look at the defense is older and the offense is relatively young. I mean, and you're talking about most guys in their 20s, mid to late 20s, right? And you're talking about most of the guys there.
But they're not getting the commensurate experience. Like when Vigneault is stapling Buchnevich to the bench, it's not helping him long term. When you're not playing Shea in the last 5 minutes of playoff games, this is not helping him develop. So these are problems.
Well, that's the thing, right? So you have an older coach, right? You have an older system coach. And that's sort of what I wrote about today with younger players, which is why this is not necessarily working, and why I think the Ottawa Senators did work. And that's Boucher.
I think that's a fair point.
Guy Boucher has the same kind of team. It really is the same sort of team, and with the exception, obviously they've got a better defenseman, but you've got a better goalie in New York. So
right.
So I mean, at the end of the day, you have a superstar goalie, a superstar defenseman, but if you shake those 2 players out, you have basically the same teams.
I don't disagree with that.
And for people to think that the Rangers are so much better than the Ottawa Senators, or that the better team lost.
I don't even think people were going on paper. You could just look at the series and see the games that the Rangers dominated, but came out with the loss. That's all.
Yeah, but I think it's always tough to say, and I do believe in times that the better team does lose, but it's
no, I'm not going to say the better team lost. I'm just saying we've all watched games where teams have dominated and yet they lose. It happens.
The Rangers in crunch time played small in this series, and that was the problem. I mean, not small in terms of stature, small in terms of ability. They shrunk from the challenge.
Yep. Well, and I think that they played confused. If that's the right word to use. Like, I mean,
well, on the power play, that would be the exact right word.
I think again, most of the downfalls with the Rangers, you can, and I don't often like to do this, but you can seem to draw back to the coaching. You know, the way this plays out. You know, I'm not a big fan.
No doubt, he's got a lot of blame.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you play confused and you play and you guys who don't really seem to know their roles, necessarily or where they fit, and a lot of that also comes from the fact that they don't have a superstar up front. You know, so when you don't have a superstar up front, no one knows who the star is. Kind of. Mm-hmm. I see that. I mean, a little bit too, you know, and I really don't see that much of a difference between the two teams. And
going back to what Jan said, he was right about Scott Arnell, but the problem is the Rangers power play moved back to the days of when it was really bad under Mike Sullivan too. It was good for Mike Sullivan for a while, and then it got really bad. And
Scott Arnell was brought into Buffalo years ago as the power play specialist coach.
Right.
It's ironic that they struggle on the power play with that. Can we need to talk about this because
go ahead, switch gears.
It's less about the actual trade and more about the effect that it has on other teams. The Ben Bishop deal yesterday to Dallas for a 4th round pick. I think Dallas will eventually get him signed, and I think they'll probably end up buying out one of the 2 goalies that they have on the roster right now. But this totally screws teams like Calgary and Philadelphia because what are the options out there? I mean,
let me throw something out of this because I did a lot of research on this, and I was going to add this today about this too. It screws them temporarily, but the question here is, I talk to people close to Ben Bishop, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if Ben Bishop was traded again. Like, I think, how we've seen that happen before, where the rights are traded from one player to the other? Bishop wants a lot more, I think, than Dallas.
And Dallas can offer. That's possible, I guess.
Yeah.
And
$10 million to 2 guys who stink, that creates a problem.
Right. I mean, they can move one of their goalies for sure. They can figure out something to do with him. But this is really a year early for Dallas to do this. I think the idea here is Dallas is going to give this a shot. It's a conditional thing. And in the past, we've seen players who get moved early like this, like really.
Yeah. Christian Ehrhoff, I remember that.
End up moving a couple times, So I think that it's hard to say that they're screwed yet. I mean, because at the end of just because he's moved to Dallas doesn't mean the agent can't still be talking to other teams and saying to Philly, "Hey, Philly, what would you give me?"
But you can't. Here's the problem, though.
They technically do that, but they do it.
No, but here's the problem. Ron Hextall can't go back to his boss and say, "This is my game plan," because that's not a game plan.
No, it's not a game plan.
Have a game plan.
They will know. I mean, Ben Bishop will not sign with Dallas if he has a feeling or a sense or some birdie told him somewhere that he can sign for elsewhere.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing with the market the way it is right now. And I personally think the Scott Darling contract was idiocy because I don't think he's a number 1 goaltender, and he'll prove me wrong. But he's after being the backup in Chicago for 3 years, he gets four times a little over $4 million. Ben Bishop, who's been a Vezina finalist, he's going to ask between 5 and 6. And I think he'll probably get it. And if he doesn't get it from Dallas, he'll get it from somebody else. And if that's the case, right now Dallas has got Lettinen at 5.9 and Niemi making a little less than 5. They're going to have to buy out one of those 2 guys if they're going to sign Bishop.
Here's what I think with the Flyers. Just from the Flyers' perspective, then Jan, I'll let you go with the Dallas perspective. But I think from the Flyers' perspective, I think they can no longer look at Ben Bishop as an option. It might fall back to him, but it's doubtful. They have to go into the expansion draft not expecting to get Ben Bishop because no matter what, Ben Bishop's going to outlive the expansion draft.
I have a Dallas source who texted me something on this. Let me throw out this real quick because this is interesting. Bishop or not, Hitchcock must overhaul team defensive play dramatically. Sure. As it wasn't the rough, any goalie would struggle to get north of 9-10.
Sure, that's fine. But here, so Bishop is going to go beyond the expansion draft with Dallas, and the Flyers, what they do in the expansion draft matters. And so the Flyers, where I thought originally they might be dangling that contract with Neuwirth, now that the goalie market has shrunk to where it is, they're going to have to keep Neuwirth, and they may have to risk losing Stellaris. They may not have a choice in the matter now, because when you look around, what are the real options for Philly other than Neuwirth and other than Mason? There's not much.
Brian Elliott.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
And they're not going to offer Bishop term. They're going to offer him more money, but there's no way they're going to give him 5 years, and he'll get more years somewhere else. That's my
come down to Elliott and Mason.
Three times 6. That's what they'd offer him.
Yep.
Elliott and Mason, I think it'll come down to the Flyers, maybe with those type two, those two, or something, maybe.
Or Ryan Miller.
Halak.
Or Halak.
I mean,
yeah, there's a possibility. I mean, that.
But those aren't great options. Neuwirth might be the best option.
No, they're not. They're not great options.
Right.
Obviously is a bigger option. Also, whoever comes out of Dallas. I mean, not that any of those. I mean, it depends what you want to do with the backup situation.
Yeah, you might be able to sign Lettinen for 2 years, $4 million if he gets bought out. But is that a good option?
Not really. If he can't stop a beach ball, go ahead, Jan.
Well, if you got Lettinen and Neuwirth, you can possibly make something out of that. I mean, it's not great. I mean, obviously you're waiting for you're waiting because you're waiting, and you don't want to. You can't go out there and do. I think Ryan Miller is not likely.
No.
But I think Miller will end up in LA.
So, I mean, I think, well, first of all, like you said it, with Hitchcock being there, I think Bishop now has a comfort factor because he played for Hitchcock in St. Louis, and that's probably part of the reason why he was pushing to get.
Did it go well, though? I'm trying to remember. I don't think it went all that well.
No, it didn't. But at least he kind of knows Hitchcock and knows the system that he's going to try to implement.
Hitchcock is not always the best thing.
Right. I think
Hitchcock and any goalie is not comfortable.
My understanding also is
you're going to a team where Hitchcock's the coach. You're like, and you already know what he's like. That's not always a great thing.
True. I think my understanding is I thought the 4th round pick wasn't conditional. I thought it was a 4th rounder regardless.
It is. It's regardless.
Okay. So sorry.
That's a decent chunk to give up for a guy who if you don't think you're going to sign him. Clearly, obviously, Niemi or Lettinen are going to be exposed in the expansion draft. They're not going to try to sign Bishop until post-expansion draft, so you don't have to worry about it. And then, personally, in my opinion, I personally would probably waive Niemi before I would waive Lettinen. Mainly because I think Lettinen is probably a little bit better of a goalie potentially than Niemi is. And if you're going to keep one guy and let the other guy go, you might as well waive the guy who's got less talent and probably has a less of an opportunity to come back and burn you by going somewhere else.
Yeah, I think Niemi's better than Lettinen. That's my opinion.
He's won a cup, but I mean the thing is, yeah, Niemi is making close to 6, or Niemi is making a little under 5. Lettinen is making close to 6. So with the buyout, and they both have a year remaining, you're clearing more space to buy out the bigger salary. So that's why
Lettinen in a reduced role, because Lettinen went on a nice little run last year before he got hurt again. So he's clearly not able to be a number 1. But if you're gonna split time, I will take Lettinen over Niemi every day of the week.
And I'll give if Dallas buys out Lettinen, I'll give you a wild guess of where Lettinen would sign as a free agent as a goaltender. Winnipeg.
No, I don't think so.
I think they're going to go with Hellebuck. I think
they're going with Hellebuck.
They're going with Hellebuck. You have to go with Hellebuck.
Well, they have to go with Hellebuck, but they're going to need a plan B in case Hellebuck can't handle it.
But I have Eric Comrie. They had Hutchinson, but they have Eric Comrie, who had a really good year too.
And I'd rather have either one of them than go with Lettinen or Niemi. That's for sure.
Correct.
See, to me, what this does, honestly, is it makes it helps Calgary out. Like, I honestly think it doesn't help Calgary out. I think it helps Calgary out. It doesn't help Philly out because neither Pittsburgh goalie is going to end up in Philly.
Well, as a perception, it doesn't help Calgary because Ben Bishop blocked. Apparently, he had a no trade to not go to Calgary. And if you look,
I think that's why. No. And so I don't think Calgary was an option again. I think that's true. But I think that either Pittsburgh goalie now can go to Calgary because that the team that has the best team out there that needs a starting goalie is Calgary. That's the best team that needs a starting goalie. So, if you're Pittsburgh, and I guess you could say Philly is the second best team, or they're in there, right? So.
What about Vancouver?
But they're not as good as Philly or Calgary.
Demko is going to be playing for Vancouver this year. It's a matter of, is he going to start out as a backup? What's he going to do? But he probably will be in Vancouver this year.
So when you look at those two Pittsburgh goalies, one of them's going, right? And there's no way that you're going to that Vegas is going to pick up either one of those Dallas goalies in the waiver.
That'll be taken care of before expansion.
Although, you probably could give Vegas a first-round pick to not take either one of your goalies, so there is that option.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but Dallas would do that. Dallas would love them to take a goalie.
No, I know that. But I'm just saying for Pittsburgh, guaranteed to lose one of theirs.
Pittsburgh, okay, yeah.
They're not guaranteed to lose one of theirs.
Right. I don't think they will. And I think they'll work out a deal before they get
could work out that deal, yeah.
I think there will be a trade, but that's why I think Calgary's in that actually a pretty good spot because I think they're the one team that has the need, has the money.
Yeah, I mean, let's say Vegas loves Daniel Sprong. They might say,
right,
we'll give you Daniel Sprong down the road. Do not take one of our goalies.
Well, the other question is if Vancouver or one of these guys want to get Marc-Andre Fleury, do you guys still believe, regardless of what you saw in the playoffs, that Fleury is still a true number one?
Yes.
I think he's in the middle of the pack of number ones, but yes.
I think he's a true number one, and I think he'll waive his no-move clause.
I don't think he'll waive it. That's the problem.
The big one is the second question there. Yeah, I don't know if he will waive it or not. But I think he's definitely proven to be a true number one.
Yeah, but we have to acknowledge, while he started off the playoffs great, he has faded a little, and so I would put him, like, I haven't ranked every goalie, right? But I would put him, like, in the middle of the number ones in hockey. He's no longer a top 10 guy, I don't think.
Is it fair, though, altogether to say he's faded against the Washington Capitals? I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean,
you just have to go by the quality of goals he's letting in.
I mean, Holtby's not a true number one then either. He's faded against the Penguins. But we all know.
I mean, look, come on.
Holtby's terrible in this series.
I think it's less that Fleury has faded and more the fact that the Penguins as a team have completely.
Yeah, I do too, and I think
that's part of it.
They don't have their defense is all hurt.
No, Letang doesn't help them.
Yeah, well, that's why I picked Washington in this series, and right now
it's a really tough. I mean, you're playing against a really tough team. I mean, he played very well in the first round. He played very well in a lot of the second round, maybe enough of the second round to get them the win. It depends on what happens tonight, right?
Okay, but if you start going around the league, Marc-Andre Fleury is not better than Holtby. He's not better than Lundqvist.
No, he's not better than Holtby.
He's not better than Price. I could go with at least 4 more goalies. He's going to fall behind those guys too.
He's not better than Tuukka Rask.
Is he better than Matt Murray?
Right.
No.
Right, but he's in the. I still think he's in the top. He's in legitimate number one, and he's in the top.
He's a legitimate number one, but I'm saying he's probably in the middle of the pack now of that.
Yeah, hey, Mike Smith is a legitimate number one, but it's with Arizona. I mean,
top 15 legitimate number one.
Yeah, he's a top 15. He's a top 15.
He's a top 15. Yes.
He's in the top half of the number one goalies.
Now, the other significant transaction yesterday was Tanner Pearson getting signed for 4 years by the LA Kings for what I thought was a rather economical $3.75 million per, especially after he had a really good offensive year. And Russ, we were talking about this before. Rob Blake is going to have to make some of the moves that Dean Lombardi wouldn't make because now, I mean, Pearson is an RFA. Now they've signed him for 4 years. They're going to have to sign Tyler Toffoli. They might get a little better of a deal on him because he didn't have a great year.
I still think he's making more than Pearson. I
think you're right, and I think Pearson gave him the Southern California discount because who doesn't want to play in Southern California? But the problem is, looking at that LA Kings roster, you've got like absolute freaking dead money in Marian Gaborik making almost $5 million a year, Dustin Brown making close to $6 million with 5 years left. To buy that contract out, if they buy out Dustin Brown, it's insanity. But they're probably going to have to do it because they have to open up this room for Toffoli and for Pearson.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to buy out Brown.
I don't think that. I mean, if it was a stupid contract when they gave it to him, and I think everybody at the time thought it was a silly contract, and now they're paying the price for it. But as we talked about, you reward a guy for what you think he's going to do in the future, not what he's done in the past. And that was based on what he had done in the past. And Pearson had a good year. I don't think he had a great year. He had a very uneven year. He had stretches where he put up a lot of points, and there was also a lot of stretches during the season where he was completely invisible and did absolutely nothing. So he probably took a little bit of a discount, but I don't think he got a huge discount in terms of getting 4 and 14 from them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, these days, when you're talking about 3.75 or 4, what does that really get you in the NHL if you really think about it?
Right.
A third, fourth defenseman or a second line winger.
And I think he's a second line winger. I don't view him as a real top line winger. So it's a probably reasonable price and maybe a slight discount, given that he's staying in LA compared to
Dale Weiss is getting $4 million, right?
What's that?
Dale Weiss gets $4 million, right, Eck?
Yeah, and that's insane, right? So
yeah.
I have to bring this up because we brought it up yesterday, and I thought that the response this morning was rather humorous after Renee Fassel talked at the World Championships yesterday about how he's not giving up on the Olympics. and he commented again to Darren Drager of TSN. He said, I had a phone call with Gary Bettman yesterday, and he told me again, Renee, the decision is we will not go. I didn't know it was possible to beat somebody down over the Atlantic, but Gary Bettman did.
Yeah, this is, to me, it was the Three Stooges. It really was. And you could either say that Rene Fossell was either Shemp or Curly Joe, but he had Mo on one side and Larry on the other, and he took a shot on the cheek from both of them. He did.
And he went on to say, only death is final, but Gary was very clear yesterday when he said, we're not going. So what can I do?
Yeah.
And
you only had 3 years to negotiate this.
Yeah, and then the worst part of it, the worst part of it here was Fossell laid the groundwork or laid the concessions on the NHLPA. He says the players are the ones to go. They have to make an important step here. So basically, Fossell threw the NHLPA under the bus to say, okay, you're going to have to give up something to make this happen. And Donald now I'm sure that Donald Fear is going to call Rene Fossell and beat him down.
Here's the funny thing. I spoke to a non-hockey person yesterday, a good sports person, who had a take on this that was interesting in that he feels like, hey, the NHL, if they can't market the success of their team after the Olympics, it's on them and not the IOC. And my comeback was they tried. They tried to put advertising on their jerseys. Yeah. If the IOC would have just said, yes, you could put an advertiser or two on the jerseys, the NHL would have been like, great, now we've monetized it. I can go back to my players and we'd all be happy, and the owners, and they'd all be happy. But they didn't allow that. That's where the IOC really screwed up.
Yeah, and they changed.
In like the World Cup of Hockey, where they had their logos on their sleeves, like
right.
Because that way, at least, and it really just behooves everyone, because it goes out, it plays.
Why was that so egregious?
Like, oh, that guy's on the Flyers or whatever, that guy's on the.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, you look at what they put on jerseys, right? If you remember, the 75th anniversary patch went above the chest. The 100th anniversary one is going on the sleeves. So, look, I'm not a big fan of having advertisements on the sleeves or on the jerseys, but you can do it in a way where it's not obtrusive and it's not really bothering the look of the jersey.
Well, here's the ironic thing. If you remember back in 1980 when the Olympics were in Lake Placid, the NHL wasn't involved in the Olympics, but the Rangers, Islanders, and Sabres all had the Lake Placid patch on their jerseys. So there was an advertisement agreement. And I remember in past Olympics where CBC.
I don't think that was an advertising agreement. I remember at the time it was just something that the New York teams did, like as a New York thing, like just as like a.
Okay.
We're back.
I mean, okay. I'm just making the point that it was on the jerseys, and and then I remember obviously watching games on CBC before previous Olympics with them having the little Olympic icon on the bottom of the screen for a month or a month and a half before the Olympics. So they changed the rules in the middle of the game, and now there's no association between the Olympics and the NHL, and that's the reason why Gary Bettman is telling the IOC to go stuff it, because they're not benefiting at all from this. So I guess they're going to have to enjoy watching the Spengler Cup in Pyeongchang.
The IOC's biggest problem is the rings. They're hung up on the rings.
Well, no, that's their thing,
No, but the thing is, at some point, if you want to get what you want, we all have to admit they would get better ratings if they had NHL players there. And it's not like the NHL was going to cover up the rings with an advertisement.
Cover up the rings.
No.
I mean, the rings are iconic, and that's something that that is the big thing for them. But that's not. There's plenty of space on the jersey to put a logo.
They could put it on the ribbing. I mean, there's so many places. Like, to me, that was the biggest fail in this whole thing. I don't blame Gary Bettman.
I don't know that the logo would have been enough to make this happen, though.
I think it would have been, because that was their last-ditch effort. If you go back and look at it, the NHL said, "Hey, give us advertising."
Yeah, and
I think that's more than just that. I think it's more than. Because when advertising in the Olympics, I'm thinking maybe they wanted some spots during the games and stuff like that too to promote the NHL. Well,
I think NBC would have done that.
Yeah,
NBC will do that anyway. They did that last time. But.
And apparently all the NHL, like after the proposal of the extension of the CBA, all they really wanted at the end was the PA to guarantee not using the nuclear option in a couple years, the opt out on the current CBA. and they wouldn't even do that because they don't want to give up 1 inch in negotiations. So that's why this is like sort of the first battle of the next CBA situation, and that's what it is.
Mike, why would you give that up? What are they giving you for the rights for you to give up that option? They're agreeing to do something that they probably should do anyway. They're saying, well, if you want to play, then you have to give us up your rights to be able to opt out of the CBA. No organization in their right mind is going to go ahead and do that. It's a pointless and it's a ridiculous argument, and it's them trying to squeeze the players and saying, we're going to make you look bad in front of the public eye and say it's your fault why we're not going to the Olympics.
Hey, I do have breaking news.
Go ahead.
Here's the breaking news. Vladimir Putin scored 7 goals in a pickup hockey game. I have to bring it up because, again, I want to know who the goalie is.
Sean Spicer. That's who the goalie was.
No, but that goalie has to be afraid for his life if he makes a save on Vladimir Putin.
The goalie was Michael Flynn.
I have a great story about that, but I can't share it. Yeah. There's something that happened. I know something that happened in Russia recently.
But he scored 7 goals. I want to know how many shots he took. He probably took 7 shots.
7.
Yeah. I bet it's
betting 1,000.
Let's hope they didn't tell the goalie to let in 8 goals. That's all I can say.
He's got better odds of winning the KHL Rookie of the Year than Aaron Judge does in the American League.
Let's get into tonight, okay? We got 2 Game 7s here. We got 10 minutes to talk about them. All right, so we got 2 Game 7s, and this is something. I mean, this is fantastic. Like, this is the night. This is a great night of hockey ahead of us. Just unless if you're a fan of one of these 4 teams, it's horrifying. But if you're a fan of anyone else in the league, it's fantastic. So how do we think these are going to go down? Like Washington. Let's start with Washington, Pittsburgh. Each give a couple of second thought on how this is going to play out. Jan, why don't you start this on Washington, Pittsburgh?
Well, I mean, clearly, I mean, no momentum doesn't carry over from game to game, but clearly Washington has to be viewed as having some momentum. Coming back from 3 games to 1 down, Game 7 at home, they have a chance to really rewrite their history given their career marks in Game 7s in general and their inability to get past the second round of the playoffs. And before the playoffs, I had said that I thought Washington would beat Pittsburgh in 7. I didn't necessarily figure them coming back from 3-1 down. They're clearly starting to take advantage of the flaws in the Pittsburgh defense, especially Ron Hainsey. You look at a couple of goals that have been scored, they've taken advantage of his inability to have any speed up the ice. And I kind of think that Washington has carried Ovechkin. This is one of those games where I really think Ovechkin finally gets one in a key moment. I'm going to go with Washington 3-1 final over Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Russ, what do you think?
All right, a couple of things. I'm not going to give a score, but I did see, and again, this was like we had all opinions across the board, that Sidney Crosby was not diagnosed with a concussion during that game after that spill into the board. So I think that that's important because I think now, a couple days later, we'll see a better Crosby. Malkin got slashed in the hand in that game, too. He still scored a goal, but probably wasn't at his best. I'm not betting against Crosby and Malkin because I think I saw them stepping up late in that game, and I think they're going to step up even more in this game. I think Sullivan's going to go with those guys. They still have those sneaky little guys, the Rusts and the Shearys, and I think Pittsburgh will win this game. They might even win it in overtime. I think this is going to be an excruciating loss for Capitals fans. I'm sorry.
Mike.
I mean, I picked the Caps in 7, so I have to go with them. But I agree with what Jan said. I mean, one of the things that's been sort of a key for them turning around this series was the shift down of Ovechkin from the first line to the third line, putting him with Eller and Wilson, playing in a more energetic role. And I think he can be more the center of the offense at that line, and moving Burakovsky up to the first line with Backstrom. The key to me is going to be the power play. This is where the Shattenkirk acquisition is the big thing. You know, his main responsibility has been the point guy in the power play. If they can get their power play working and effective, I think they'll win this game. I'm not going to pick a score either because you never know what's going to happen. But I think Washington in the end will win. But you know what? Psychologically, this is a big hurdle for the Caps to get over. You would have much preferred to win this series in 5 or 6 and be dominant. And they only became a dominant team when their back was up against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this game, I kind of agree with what everybody's saying. So much of this game is going to depend on how it comes out in the beginning. You know, like the beginning of this game, you're going to get a sense of right off the bat, I think.
Shattenkirk has 1 goal in the playoffs, just so you know.
Yeah,
I don't know how much home ice. I don't know how much home ice benefits Washington in this. I think it puts more pressure on them.
It might, but that building can be pretty good if they get going. Like they have to, if they fall behind, then of course all the fans are going to feel the same thing that the Caps are feeling, which is that pressure of it. But I think that this is a tough spot for the Caps. I honestly do. I really think that. I think that when
here's my one hope. My one hope: if the Capitals lose, that we hear Hornman just kind of signing off like. That's what I hope.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, to me, like this is like, are the Caps going to? It's two things. One is it's the Caps in general, and the fact that they have to win 3 games in a row here, and they've won 2 games in a row, and that's impressive. But you're winning 3 games in a row against Pittsburgh is tough. And then at the end of the day, remember last year when Pittsburgh comes home? We were at the Game 5. Rush, you were there too in the Stanley final, and the building is like, there could not have been a bigger disappointment than that Game 5 than Penguins not winning. That was, you had hundreds of thousands of people outside, people everywhere. And this Penguins team came back in Game 6 and just rolled. I mean, they rolled, and to me that they're capable of bouncing back. They've been through this before. It's nothing new to them. This is not as big of a deal as that was. I mean, it because then you're in the Stanley Cup Finals and stuff like that. So to me, the experience is there. It's just, are the horses there? Or are the horses there for the Penguins? I mean, it really comes down to that, and I don't know that the horses are there. And is Marc-Andre Fleury there? Like that is he's an easy goalie to shake. Sometimes that last game. That's why I would have gotten him out of there so much sooner than they did. I don't think letting them score all those goals on him was a good idea at all.
I don't think it matters to him.
It does. I mean,
the one thing Marc-Andre Fleury does shake off losses pretty well, though. He does.
The playoffs, not always, though. I mean, I agree with you at times, but all right, let's move on to the other one. Edmonton, Anaheim. So this is a good one, obviously. Mike, why don't you start with this one?
Well, I mean, first of all, Anaheim cannot fall behind by a touchdown in the first period. That's a big key to this game. If they give up the opening touchdown, they're in trouble. But I look at this game. I mean, you can say all the pressure is on Anaheim because they're expected to win this series, and Edmonton is the young team. But I think there is some amount of pressure on Edmonton. They've tasted playoff success for the first time since 2006. I think that market is dying for that team to finally take a step forward. I think that obviously the big key here is Gibson being much better early in the game than he was in Game 6. Anaheim will feel the pressure if they fall behind, and they fell behind in Game 5, 3-0, and charged back and scored 3 goals in the last 4.5 minutes of regulation. You can't do that in this game. I think it's imperative for Anaheim to get up early and attack the Edmonton defense. Clefbaum may be back, but he's not going to be 100%. The Sekera is probably not going to be in this game. And that is still the weak link with the Edmonton Oilers is their defense. If they have to play Eric Greiba and Griffin Reinhart, that's a defense that you can exploit. So I think that Anaheim will do that. The only, a guy like Nate Thompson, who was their 4th line guy, may not play. They called up Sam Carrick from the minors, which, that's not an insignificant thing because Thompson has scored some key goals in the playoffs for them. But in the end, I think Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler, and their defense, I think, will win out. I think Anaheim's going to win that game.
Mike, a rest.
I think Gibson needs to make a good few saves early. I agree with that part of it. I think Getzlaf has been maybe the best player in the playoffs. I mean, him or Carlson.
Yeah.
So I think if he exerts himself that way, that will be a problem. I think that Milan Lucic has come up really small and actually has let his temper get the best of him. And I think Anaheim with guys like Corey Perry are just a team that get him off the rails. I think you need to get Milan Lucic off the rails. I mean, if you look at it, how many goals has Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had? Do you guys know the answer?
Yeah.
0.
Yep.
0. Draisaitl and McDavid are fueling that team. Yeah. Like, that is the whole team. If you can manage to shut that down a little bit, because Draisaitl has been a big problem for them, but if you could do that, you're winning the game, and I think Anaheim will figure out how to do that.
All right. What do you think, Jim?
So I'm going to go the opposite approach. On paper, everything seems to be Anaheim. I just get a hunch about this Edmonton team. One key, and I was just checking this up, that I think is a very big key, is that Oscar Klefbom may be back for Game 7. And adding him back to the lineup adds a big component to the blue line, especially on the power play there for Edmonton, which has been good overall. I agree with what Russ said. Lucic has played on the edge and gone over the edge several times, but that's the challenge of having Milan Lucic on your team. There's a lot of passengers on this team, but McDavid and Draisaitl have been the guys. And on paper, with Getzlaf and Raquel and Perry and Silverberg and the defense that Anaheim has, they should be the winners. But Edmonton showed me a little bit in terms of coming out in Game 6 and just completely blitzing Anaheim. So I just have this hunch that Edmonton makes just one or two more big plays in this game and finds a way to beat Anaheim to go to the Western Conference Finals.
I am with you, Dan, a little bit. Like, I think this is Edmonton's game to lose, honestly. Because I really think that just having watched so many of these Game 7s with Anaheim, I watched last year's Game 7 against Nashville from beginning to end, and the players just don't necessarily on Anaheim in that game, and in most of these Game 7s, the story has been Getzlaf and Perry coming up really small. Like now Getzlaf has been great, okay, this series, no question about it, but none of that is really going to matter until tonight. Like, honestly, right. He's got to show.
Do it again.
Yeah. And that's been the story. It hasn't been that Anaheim, the goalies or anything like that. It's been the fact that they've hardly scored any goals in these Game 7s. Like, they really don't. And to me, that's what this comes down to tonight, because if they can't score right off the bat, if they fall behind, they're not coming back in this game. Like, I agree with you.
I think the one factor with Anaheim, and Getzlaf has had a great series, but the one thing is similar to San Jose over the last couple of years, the responsibility, the core of that team is shifting from Getzlaf and Perry to guys like Silverberg and Raquel, and they have played just as good as Getzlaf in the playoffs. So I think that speaks to if you depended on Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau in San Jose, you were going to lose. But if you're depending on Pavelski and Couture, you have a better chance of winning. And I think that Anaheim is at that crossroads right now, and that's why I think they'll win. But if they have to rely,
I do want to say this. In a series of tweets, I saw that Donald Duck is sticking with Anaheim, which is predictable, but Goofy is going with Edmonton. So if that says anything.
Yeah.
What is Goofy, by the way? What is he? Is he a dog?
I just saw Goofy walking out of his office
He's a dog. Okay.
Just saw Goofy walking out of his office with boxes and under his arm, by the way, because, believe me, you're picking Edmonton in this series and you're a Disney person, you're done. Come on, Goofy.
Did Goofy work for the FBI?
He's gonna have to go to the WB. All right, yes, there you go. No, I mean, honestly.
Maybe they'll trade Goofy for the WB.
I see we're ending on a
hold on. I got a trade. They're going to trade Goofy for the WB Frog.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a fair trade.
I live in a family with small children, and the Radio Disney Network is on here a lot.
Oh no!
Right. So, and there is, and every hit song that comes on the Radio Disney Network is changed to be like not even slightly, even the implication of anything, like the smallest things, like putting a needle. They changed threading through the eye of a needle because they thought that was somehow,
Yeah.
So the ultimate political correctness here is Disney releasing the fact that one of their people goes with Anaheim and one goes with Edmonton. I mean, it's very surprising to me. Like, I think that's very. I would rather these Disney characters be true to their own group than have like one of them.
Maybe their account got hacked. That we'll keep up with this story.
Yeah, let's stay on top of this one. All right. We'll have more tomorrow. We'll tell you who Smurfette picks in the. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow. Enjoy the games.